Hello and welcome to the third video tutorial on xaitMap Creator 2.5. In this third tutorial, we will learn how to use spawn points to discard unreachable parts of navmesh geometry. So what are spawn points? Spawn points are marker objects that are introduced in xaitMap Creator 2.5 to indicate reachable areas in a navmesh. In the example below, there is a navmesh indicated in blue. The navmesh consists of two connected components. One component found here in the lower screen consists of four polygonal faces that are connected along the edges. The other component consists of only two faces that are connected as well. The interesting thing is, there is no connection from one component to the other, so an NPC that is walking on this component will never be able to reach the other component from here. The function of spawn points is pretty easy. Whenever an xaitMap Creator project uses spawn points, it will check which faces are reachable from a spawn point and which ones are not. All unreachable parts of the navmesh will just be discarded. In the example below, this large component will be kept, and the small component will be discarded. Let's switch back to the software. For this tutorial, I created a different project and imported this complex building geometry, which is visible in the top view here. And by looking at the 3D view, we can see the generated navmesh. As you can see, the floor plan of this building is subdivided into navmesh polygons, which is the result we would expect. But also the top part of these walls are indicated as walkable areas. The way xaitMap works, this is a natural result. However, we don't want NPCs to walk around on top of the walls. We want them to walk on the floor. So now I'll show you how to use spawn points to achieve this behavior. First, we have to turn on the usage of spawn points. In order to do so, I select the navmesh build and take a look at the Optimize section of the Properties window. Notice that down here, in Use Spawn Points, it is currently set to false. I changed that to true. So now, this navmesh will discard all geometry that is not reachable from spawn points. I now regenerate this navmesh, and what will happen now is that we don't get any navmesh output at all, which is the obvious result since we don't have any spawn points in the scene yet, so no navmesh will be reachable from any of those points. I'll do this nevertheless just to demonstrate the results. And there we are. So as expected, our navmesh is gone. In order to get a navmesh here, I have to first introduce a spawn point. I do this just by right-clicking on the floor and then clicking on Get Spawn Point, and now we have a spawn point indicated here as a yellow box. What I'll do now is regenerate the navmesh, and there we are. As you can see, now we have a navigation mesh that only contains those parts that are reachable from the spawn points. Note that those parts that are not reachable from spawn points, namely the top of the walls, have been discarded. So, in this third tutorial, we learned how to use spawn points to indicate reachable areas in a navigation mesh, and how to use them to discard parts of the navmesh that are not reachable by an NPC and thus useless. Thanks for listening.